Hey buddy, so we are going to create our first CI pipeline on Azure using YAML language. So YAML stands for yet another markup language. So we are going to use that. Okay, now the interesting thing is, what if I tell you that, the CI pipeline, the build pipeline that we create or we're going to create today, that thing is already handled by Visual Studio. All those options are already available in Visual Studio. I may sound stupid here, but that is actually true. So we will go through, we will write down all the steps and we will relate every step with Visual Studio, and that will give us clear picture. So let's go ahead and try to create our first pipeline. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we have to open dev.azure.com, and that would be Azure DevOps URL, right? And once you land to this URL, you would see a couple of projects or maybe one project or more projects. That depends on how many projects you are working on that Azure DevOps. So you have to choose one project for which you wanted to create the CI pipeline, right? So let's say I wanted to go with this project, so I'm going to choose this project. So let's open that, and once you are inside that project, you will see a couple of options on the left hand side, and here you see the pipelines, right? So we are going to create pipelines, and inside pipeline we will create CI pipeline. So CI stands for continuous integration, and in simple language, if you wanted to understand CI pipeline, so it's just a build pipeline. So we are going to create one build pipeline. Let's go ahead and click on this option, the first option that you see, pipelines. So I'm going to click this. So let's click it. Okay, here you go. So over here on this page, on the right hand side, you will see a button called new pipeline. So just click on that new pipeline button, and when you click on that, it will ask you, Azure DevOps is going to ask you that where your code is. Either it's on Azure Repository, Bitbucket Cloud, GitHub, GitHub Enterprise Server, other Git, or Subversion, right? So in our case, my code is sitting on Azure Repos, right? So I'm going to choose this Azure Repos Gate, but in your case, if it is on Bitbucket, choose Bitbucket. If it is on GitHub, choose GitHub, right? So let's go with Azure Repos Git. So I'm going to click this option, and so you see these will be configured in 4 different steps. First is connect, then select, configure, and the last step is review, right? So we are on the select. So over here it says select repository for your new pipeline. So we need to choose our repository. So since I have two repository listed here, so I'm going to choose this for my API, right? So I have chosen that. Now the third step is configure for new pipeline, right? So that step means it is asking which language your project is built, right? Which framework your project is built. So it has listed all those technology, language, framework that it support, right? So mine is built in .NET Core, so I'm going to choose .NET Core, .NET Framework. So let's click it. Okay, here you go. Now once you clicked on that option, it says review your pipeline YAML, right? So what happened over here that so it has given you one default template by itself. So see, Microsoft is smart now. I remember when I was working like 3 years back or 4 years back, at that time it was empty, but now it has given a small template that is a very basic template, is useful to create a basic build, right? So this is the template. Now let's try to understand this template with steps, and we will add all the required steps, more steps actually, because these are not enough to create one build pipeline, right? So we will go and add few more steps that will help us to create other pipeline, the release pipeline, right? But let's focus on build pipeline now. So over here you will see trigger. What trigger means, right? It says that I will trigger only this build for main branch. When you work with Git or any source control, there is something called branches, right? So main is our branch. So if you have master branch, you can list down here master branch, just say enter and you type the same thing and say I want to trigger for master branch as well, or maybe I want to trigger for dev branch or development branch, right? So all the branches you can specify, and this option, this trigger means that says CI, continuous integration. Whenever there is a code check-in for this branch or against this branch, this build pipeline is going to run by itself. So basically you are setting an auto trigger for this branch on this branch, right? Okay, now let's say pool. It needs one operating system to run this whole build, right? So over here I'm saying Windows latest. So whatever the Windows latest operating system, it will pick by itself, and I don't need to explicitly say, hey, Windows 22, Windows 19, something like that. So that's why I'm saying Windows latest, right? Okay, now this section called variable. Over here, you can define all of your variable with any name, right? So these are the Microsoft default name that says solution is what? So it says, any file with .solution, just pick that file. And now I'm going to relate this with Visual Studio, right? So if I go to Visual Studio over here, let's go to open containing folder, and you see this file. So this is my solution file, right? So this file is solution file. So what I'm saying, let's go to here, and I'm saying, hey, choose that file where the extension and with .sln, right? And in this case, properties, and you will see somewhere on the details, this file is SLN file, right? So it will target that file. Now over here, so it says build platform is any CPU. What it means? So if I go to Visual Studio, this thing, you see this thing that says this any CPU, right? So whatever in the Visual Studio, we are configuring same thing on the CI pipeline, on the build pipeline. So this option, I'm going to say that hey, build platform should be any CPU, and then build configuration is what? So if again I relate this with Visual Studio, so it says release. Over here you will see this option called debug release. Since why I have chosen release over here, because I know that I'm going to deploy this code on an environment, not on the local. For local, debug is fine, but for deployment for on environment, release is always recommended, right? So I have chosen this release value. Okay, now the first step here, you start the steps. You just have to say steps and add the task, right? So we are done with auto trigger. That means I'm making it auto trigger, not the manual trigger against this branch. Which operating system that I need? I'm saying this is my pool, and then I'm saying these are the variables that I need down when I'm going to add steps, and I can add as many as variables that I need down the line, right? Okay, now here you go with steps. So over here, once you say step, you can add many tasks that is required to build your project. Okay, now I need Nugget tool installer. But why this? Because I know my application is built in .NET, and there must be some DLLs that I have downloaded from Nugget, those Nugget packages, right? So that's why I'm saying Nugget tool installer I require. And let's go to Visual Studio again to understand better. So on the Visual Studio, there is an option called tools on the top, and over here somewhere where you go, Nugget package manager, right? So this option I'm bringing in browser as well, in CI pipeline as well, that I need this installer. Okay, when I have this installer with me, what I need to put the command, right? Nugget command. And over here I'm saying, hey, restore whatever is in the solution. So this is a variable. When you say dollar, that stands for variable, that now this is a variable and the name is solution, right? Now which variable is this? This variable, you see, solution variable, so starts with dollar. And what value would be here? This value would be here. Now either you can copy this value and put directly over here, right, like this, or you can choose variable that you have defined on the top, right? So this will restore the whole solution. Whatever the Nugget package is required, it is going to download, restore the whole solution, right? Now let's move to next step. Okay, the next step is you wanted to make sure that you are building your project successfully. There is no errors, no war, there is no errors, no exception at build time, right? So I'm saying I need a task which is called VS Build, right? So this Visual Studio Build will help me to build my application. Now, what are the inputs? So inputs are parameters. What are the parameters required to run this task? The first is solution. For sure, for which solution I wanted to build, right? Once you say this build on the top over here, build solution, so this is same thing, right? This task is same thing. Okay, now I'm saying, hey, I wanted to build my solution, whatever the name over here, right? End with .sln. Then what with the ms build argument? So these are some of the default arguments that we need to build this solution, and these are provided by Microsoft by default, so we don't need to worry about this. Okay, now platform, again, platform was what? That CPU thing, right? Which platform I wanted to build. So in my case, I'm using here the variable $build platform, and what was that? That was something called any CPU, right? Okay, now let's move forward. And configuration, right? What was the build configuration? So let's go ahead and look what was the build configuration, and it was release, right? So I'm reading this variable over here, right, in a VS Build. Now, so let's say your Visual Studio Build is also ran successfully. Now you may have unit test, you may have integration test in your project, so you wanted to build that as well, right? You wanted to make sure all the facts, all the theory are passing successfully, those test cases are not failing. This step which says VS means Visual Studio Test, right? So I wanted to build my Visual Studio Test as well, and I wanted to make sure there is no error, no test is failing. And what are the parameters required? What are the input parameters required? Again, platform and configuration, build platform and build configuration, right? That means I wanted to run on any CPU and in release mode. So these are the basic things to create your build pipeline. Now, what are they enough? Let's say, so, the next step is everything is done. Now you wanted to, save it, right? Save it and run. So once you save, so this pipeline will be created under that project, and then you have to say run, right? And once you run, so let me show you how it would look like. So let me show you some existing that I have already executed. Over here, you will see who has triggered that pipeline, right? So in my case, I have triggered that pipeline, so it is showing my name. Now you will see repository was what? Repository and version was what? So it will display my name, right? And then it is showing my branch name. I had my branch name Azure Pipeline, so that is why it's showing, right? So this will show you the commit. So if you click over this, it will land to a different page, and it will show your pull request that you had created against that build, right? Okay, over here time started and elapsed, so we know that it is giving all the time information. Okay, now related, so it is saying all the work item related. So these are the those Azure task, Azure DevOps task, user stories number that are linked with this pull request, right? This code, and that is linked with this build. Now this is something very important. It says 0 artifacts, right? So it should never be 0 artifact, honestly. If your intention is to just create CI pipeline and that's it, then you are good. You don't need to worry about. But if you wanted to deploy this build on some environment, dev, stage, QA, production, you need something, right? You need some DLL files to deploy on the environment, right? So over here, we still need to work. Let's go further, and then we will back again how we can generate the artifacts. So artifacts are what? Artifacts are like collections of files, folders that are required to be get deployed on the environment, on the Azure App Service, to run your website on customer screen, right? So now let's focus on test and coverage. So it says 100% pass. And what was that step? This step, the last step, that it has checked the Visual Studio test, and the report that it published, it is saying 100% pass. That means no test case failed. But if I click on the test, so you see it is showing the whole report. It is saying there were total 2 tests, everything is passed, 0 failed, and no others, right? And 100% test coverage. How much time it took? Just 11 seconds, right? So this is the basically your build test report, your unit test report that you had created for your project. Now let's go back to summary and let's focus on zero artifact. So what if I wanted to deploy this CI on any environment? I for sure need some artifact, I for sure need some files, right? So for that, I need to add some steps. So these were the basic steps that Microsoft Azure DevOps has given to us. Now, if I open this notepad where I have pasted some code already, so I need some of the code, right? So I will copy from here these 3 steps that I require, right? So let's do one thing. Let's copy the first step first, and I will go there and I will paste it. So no, let's paste it and let's fix. So remember, when you are working with YAML, the indent is more important, because here no curly braces, no JSON format. So that is why this YAML is dependent on indent, the space. If you do one more space, you see it will start crying that I don't understand what you are writing, there's some error. Make sure you are working with indent, right? The right indent. Okay, now what this step says. So this step says that publish the artifacts. So publish build artifact, right? And this is the display name, what name you wanted to display while building. Okay, now here this says what would be the name of your artifact. So it is saying some name API. So let's go ahead and take a look how this artifact will get produced. So first thing is the name would be what? Some name API, right? So if I go there over here, so we see over here 3 published. That means the code that we are going to write over here, right now we have just written 1 step, but originally what will happen, I'm going to copy all the other 2 steps as well. So let's just copy, so to avoid any confusion, I'm going to paste it here, and let's uncomment this code as well, right? And let's fix the indent issue again. Okay, now so the first artifact is what? Your API artifact, right? Let's go ahead and click on these 3 published, and let's take a look at the artifact. Okay, so you see these are the folder that we have created, and first is what? Related to API, right? So if you open this, you will see bunch of files, right? And then there is a zip file as well that is required when you will deploy to your CD pipeline, right? So this is important. Now the second is what? So the second artifact is for template. So it's just a name, you can put any name. So over here, it is just going to copy the same file as it is, right? No publish here. You see, it is publish and it is copy. So these two are different to generate the artifact. So publish is, also creating your zip folder, right? Is also generating the DLLs. But in copy means whatever the file, how many files in that particular folder, I'm going to copy the same and paste it as it is. I'm not going to make any change in your files, right? I'm not going to generate DLL files for you. Okay, so that is what step is. Okay, now it says that copy root what, from where I need to copy. So I have to provide that folder name, right? And then content, what I'm saying start, that means copy all the content. Okay, then on the target, what should be the name of that artifact? I'm saying templates, right? And what will be the type? It is just a container, right? So now if I go and if I see, here you go, the templates, right? And these were the files that I had in my code, and it has generated as it is. No zip, no DLL, nothing, just copy paste. Let's go back and focus on our third, which should be database, right? So over here you will see this is again copy publish build artifact, not the publish build artifact, right? So again copy paste, that's it. So I'm saying I'm going to do this for my database, right? And from where I need to copy, right? The root folder would be this folder name, right? And the all content, what with the artifact name, and then artifact type, right? So if I go there, you will see this is my artifact name for database, and this has all the database files as it is. See DBO, it has tables and everything it has, right? So that way you have successfully created your first CI build pipeline using YAML. Okay, so that's all for today's video. I will see you in the next video.